Hello, Rejuve community and everyone, and welcome to another edition of Healthspan Horizons, where we interview multidisciplinary professionals in the health and wellness and longevity space. Today, we have a very special guest with a very provocative book, The World is Changing People. So we have Dr. Robert Lufkin, who is an MD and actually a educator of physicians at UCLA and a New York Times bestseller. And you can go on ahead and introduce a little bit more about, how you got here and what your new book is all about.
Well, yeah. Oh, thanks, Jasmine, Melissa. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm a fan of your program and your work, so it's an honor to be part of it here today. Yeah, I guess my background is I guess I should say I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm pretty much a traditional establishment medical science institution physician. My whole career has been as a medical school professor at large medical schools in California. I've spent my time teaching residents and physicians, also practicing medicine, and then also doing research. I'm writing, hundreds of peer-reviewed papers. My lab has received millions of dollars in grants from drug companies and the federal government device makers. So I'm really an insider on this, coming at this from the inside. And I want to say also that I'm not against Western medicine. I truly believe in Western medicine. I'm part of it. And I think that Western medicine in the 20th century especially transformed our lives, made the world a better place as far as public health measures, infectious disease, and really transformed the world with surgery and pills that were developed in the 20th century. But what the book is about, and the issue I have, is that in the 21st century, we're facing literally a tsunami of these what are called chronic diseases. And they were present in the 20th century, but now it's just overwhelming numbers. Things like diabetes, hypertension, obesity, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular disease, even mental illness. And the problem is when Western medicine takes these tools that were so effective in the 20th century against public health and infectious diseases and issues like that, they're not so effective in these chronic diseases. As we can see, the numbers are exploding and continuing to get more and more. And that's what this book is about, other ways of approaching these chronic diseases and how they may and are very likely linked by common underlying causes that Western medicine is not addressing with the pills and surgery that are given. And I was literally forced on this path because I came down with 4 of those diseases, and I was prescribed prescription medicines for them. And I had young children at the time, still in elementary school, and I knew it wasn't going to end well. So I sought answers and began researching it for myself out of self-interest, literally. And I realized there's been a tremendous revolution in knowledge and information about the way to address these. And there's an emerging paradigm that these chronic diseases can be reversed, which is what I did in myself. And that's the purpose of the book, is to share the secrets that work for me. And the problem is, the deeply disturbing thing is that many of my colleagues are still not aware of this, are not informing their patients about it. And many of the institutions, including the ones that I'm still associated with, continue to give advice that is, in my opinion, not the best advice for solving these chronic diseases. And that's why the book's titled Lies I Taught in Medical School. Each chapter is about a specific disease, and then the sort of the lie or the misunderstanding that's associated with it, and it goes on from there.
I have to say, when we were first assessing who we should bring on here, and Jasmine was like, "Oh my gosh, I love this guy. This book is like, the title of this book is why I read it, because We talk a lot on this podcast about preventative medicine and the need to come back to that for so much of us that's really just prescribing or fixing the symptoms and things like that. So, we've been super excited and we're honored to have you on here today to kind of talk about it. So we'll dive in a little bit more to the book, to the background, maybe some juicy tidbits that we can pull out of there that we won't give everything away to everyone because obviously we want people to read it, but some key takeaways or something like that. So you mentioned your background of having these chronic diseases yourself. So I mean, you don't have to talk about the diseases specifically, but like, can you elaborate a little bit more on your backstory of how you got to this point of wanting to write the book or what you did to fix yourself essentially?
Yeah, and I'm happy to talk about them. I fully disclose it in the book, so it's not a secret. If it helps other people going through this process with their own diseases and their own journey, I'm more than happy to share that information with them. So the 4 diseases I came down with was a type of arthritis called gout, and then high blood pressure or hypertension, which is now almost half of adults have this. So it's a very, very common disease, high blood pressure. And the third one was dyslipidemia, which is a big word meaning abnormalities in blood lipids or blood fats. And then the last one, and that's very common in people too. And the last one is pre-diabetes, which is abnormal blood glucose. And I went to my doctors and I was prescribed, as I said, these medicines for each one. And each of those diseases seem to be very different. Like, how is arthritis linked with high blood pressure, and how is that linked with, diabetes or something like that? And I asked about lifestyle, because I'd heard about lifestyle, but they said, and they echoed, basically, they all said, yeah, lifestyle, it really doesn't work. You need to take these pills for the rest of your life. And, that's what it is. And that was really what caused me to begin, researching things and understanding what was going on and what I came to understand. And there's a lot of evidence for the book in it. The book is not my opinion. The book is actually, although it's aimed at basic readers, so hopefully people without a medical background can get something out of it. But also, each time I make a claim or a statement in the book, it's not just Dr. Lufkin says so, because that doesn't mean anything. In scientific evidence, at least in my opinion, we need to cite scientific studies, case studies, controlled studies, epidemiological studies, different ones. But I do that heavily, published studies, and there's like 400 studies that are in the back that are referenced, but it makes it so that if you want to hand the book to your doctor and say, hey, check this out. Or if you're the kind of person that wants to dive deep yourself, and I encourage everyone to do it, and you can read those articles yourself and get information about it. But that was the interesting thing. And as I began to dive more and more into it, a couple really disturbing things came out. One was that for a lot of these chronic diseases, the pills and surgery that are recommended, they can be life-saving in the short term. Like insulin can save the life of a diabetic. But in the long term, for diseases like that and these other diseases, many of these pills and surgeries, although they control the symptoms, they don't control the progression of many of the underlying chronic conditions. So the disease continues to get worse even though the symptoms are controlled. So you're not really stopping the disease or reversing it, you're just controlling the symptoms. And to be clear, I'm not advocating anyone change any of their medicines without speaking to their doctor. And I spoke to my doctors before spoiler alert, I reversed all 4 diseases and was able to get off all medication. So, my doctors couldn't believe it. They thought the labs were wrong. But I wouldn't recommend anyone changing their medicines without their doctor. And I worked with my doctors to get off my medicines as well. But the point was that there are other things we can do if pills and surgery don't work on these chronic diseases other than controlling the symptoms in many cases. What can we do then? Are we totally screwed? No, there's something else, and that something else is broadly lifestyle, but it's specific things that work for me and work for many people that we talk about in the book. Nutrition, sleep, exercise, stress are the main pillars. And then we talk about other things as well. With if you're really into biohacking, we talk about more stuff for those who want to go into it, but you don't need to do that to significantly improve your risk of getting these diseases. And for some of these diseases, you could even reverse them, and controlled studies have shown that.
I mean,
I know. Oh, we're on this aquifer. Okay, go, Jasmine, and I'll put my little blurb in here.
All right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's astounding, right? Because it does seem very almost common sense that you should be able to reverse these diseases. But in the mainstream right now, that is still, and, I see why you had to do the not a conspiracy theorist thing at the beginning, because in the entire industry in the world, like, that is not a thing. Like, if you say, oh, you can reverse a disease, like, what are you talking about? You're out of your mind. Like, all of this stuff is incurable. And the only way is that if you take these drugs the rest of your life. And so, like, why doesn't anyone know this? If we have the scientific evidence, if we have data to back up the fact that this does happen, why is this not headline news? And why are we still stuck?
Yeah, that's a great question. And well, first of all, I believe in mankind, womankind, humanity. I don't believe anyone gets up in the morning and wants to harm someone or consciously makes a decision that's going to hurt other people as a policy. Most people don't work that way. But in our current healthcare systems, there are conscious and unconscious pernicious incentives, financial and otherwise, that drive this process. So an underlying driver, metabolic abnormalities such as diabetes, which is insulin resistance, is an underlying driver for all these diseases in the book. And that blew me away, that it's not necessarily a separate treatment for each one, although their symptoms can be treated separately. The lifestyle choices, the root cause, so to speak, the lifestyle that will improve the diabetes risk, will also improve the Alzheimer's risk, will also improve the cardiovascular risk, and will, as the last chapter of the book talks about, it will also improve our longevity, which is really, really interesting. So it's the there are a lot of different factors that we can do. Type 2 diabetes is the major kind of diabetes today. It used to be called adult onset diabetes, but now, because it occurs in children, we can't use that name anymore. It's just exploding, and more people are getting it. The problem with diabetes is a problem of carbohydrate intolerance. Type 2 diabetes is. In other words, when we eat a certain food group called carbohydrates, they spike our glucose. That drives insulin resistance, and that's basically, it decreases the ability of insulin to control the blood sugar. So we need more and more insulin all the time. We get desensitized to it, essentially, and that's insulin resistance. But this type 2 diabetes is if untreated, is a chronic progressive disease. That means it just gets worse and worse and worse, and it leads to other diseases. What other diseases does it lead to? The number one cause of surgical amputations today is type 2 diabetes. The number one cause of renal failure, kidney failure, and dialysis is type 2 diabetes. The number one cause of retinal blindness is type 2 diabetes. It's a major driver for cardiovascular disease, major driver for cancer. Alzheimer's disease is now being called type 3 diabetes because in many patients have a strong glucose component to it. And even mental illness is tied to glucose abnormalities and metabolic abnormalities we see in type 2 diabetes. Now, we have institutions like the American Diabetic Association, which is recognized worldwide as the institution for scientific advice about diabetes. On their website, they have recipes periodically, and the recipes oftentimes have high amounts of sugar in the recipe, or not high amounts, but they have sugar in the food, and they recommend just covering it with insulin, which will manage it. It will control the blood spike and all. Studies have shown that controlling type 2 diabetes with insulin, which metformin initially, then later on insulin and other drugs, which is a standard approach, will keep you from dying from glucose regulation problems. But for most of the complications I mentioned, or many of them, those will still continue to occur. In other words, that's the future you have to look at. And what the problem I have is that there's another way to control type 2 diabetes. If the main driver of type 2 diabetes is this one macronutrient called carbohydrates, that your audience probably knows there's fat, protein, and carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are the only ones that significantly spike the insulin. So there have been prospective controlled trials now where people who dramatically lower their carbohydrate intake are able to reverse their type 2 diabetes in most cases, if not all cases. Perhaps not all, but most cases. In fact, people who go on a carnivore type diet, which is a meat-only diet which has no carbohydrates or very little, most of those people will reverse their type 2 diabetes. And you don't have to be a meat eater to do it. There are vegan ways to go on a very low carbohydrate diet. So this is accessible to anyone. And the interesting thing happens. If I have type 2 diabetes and I follow the American Diabetic Association controlling with insulin, many of these chronic conditions will progress. They admit diabetes is a chronic progressive disease, and it is if you control it with insulin. But if you control it with diet, and you can actually reverse your diabetes so that you don't need insulin anymore, and you essentially put it into remission. If you do that with diet, with lifestyle, it no longer is a chronic progressive disease, and effectively you prevent most of the complications from it. And my concern is, why isn't this information being out there? Well, one of the major supporters of the American Diabetic Association is DaVita Corporation. What's DaVita Corporation? Well, they make renal dialysis, or they're in the renal dialysis business, which the number one cause is type 2 diabetes. So there are a lot of influences like that. If I go to a hospital and say, hey, I have a program to reverse all your type 2 diabetics, someone may think, wow, our surgeries are paid for by the amputations. We run a dialysis unit and all that. And I don't want to be that cynical about it, but certainly out of fairness to colleagues who treat diabetic patients, if you have a 7-minute visit to see a patient, which a lot of modern medicine is, you're limited very much in time. It is hard to explain diet and how you can control diabetes. It's much easier just to prescribe insulin or metformin or one of these other drugs. So it's a challenge. And out of fairness to the doctors, many patients, myself included, I would rather take a pill than have someone lecture me about how much I need to exercise or eat differently or something, because that and if a pill works just as well, I'd rather have the pill, But the problem is, these pills, these surgeries, in many, many cases, don't work as well as lifestyle. And lifestyle is truly transformative, and it affects all the diseases I mentioned, the risk for them certainly, and even longevity as well. And that's the message I'm trying to get out to people.
Okay, I have so many thoughts that I want to talk about. First of all, I love that you brought up the carnivore diet. I was going to bring an example before you answered this question of a good friend of mine has rheumatoid arthritis and has been on the chemo meds to kind of manage it for so long. She went on the carnivore diet and completely was able to get off of her chemo meds for it. And it legitimately changed her life, because she could not move her fingers, her toes, like she was so inflamed. And that, to me, having never had that experience, was just a huge testament. And I was like, this doesn't really make sense. You're only eating meat. Like, you are eating hamburger meat a lot. But she was like, you know what? It's completely worth it to me because the side effects from the chemo meds were so harsh that she was like, I would rather eat hamburger all the time than have to go inject myself with this every week and deal with being violently ill and all of this stuff. And so that initially got me thinking about the health aspects of this, of like, what can we do on our side? And I agree with you. I think that laziness on our part is a big reason of why this isn't mainstream, because who wouldn't rather just take a pill than have to go to the gym and buy organic food and eat more protein? That's a lot of work. Meal prepping is a lot of work. I get it. And two, the financial aspect of it. Like, I think we don't need to like get into US healthcare type of things because there's so many great things about it. But at the end of the day, it's a financial thing. For prescriptions make money, right? And which sucks because you feel like, yeah, you want to get to the preventative part, but it is what it is. And like, this sums out so many things in the Western hemisphere that's kind of what happens with it. And my second thing was, this was not on the questions that we had, but since you were talking about diabetes, I wanted to hear your thoughts on the GLP-1s and all of the other things that they're finding uses for, like Alzheimer's and things like that, that you kind of mentioned as being related to diabetes. So wanted to hear your thoughts. They don't have to be, I don't know. I guess, yeah, just tell me what you.
Yeah, GLP-1 agonists, Ozempic, and others, we've all heard about them, are fascinating, and they're very powerful, and they get to the root metabolic cause of these diseases. And that's why I think we're seeing the effects not only in diabetes, but we're seeing the effects in all the chronic diseases that I mentioned, because the metabolic abnormalities are driving them. And once we improve our metabolism, then all those risks get better and those diseases get better as well. So why don't we just take Ozempic then and do that? One, it's expensive, but that's not the biggest concern, because it's even more expensive to get these chronic diseases and, manage all these diseases. It would probably be worth it if we could get people out there. The problem with Ozempic is that we don't understand all that's going on with it. There are issues. There's a report, one that you probably have to take it for the rest of your life, for the weight loss and those control and metabolic control, because this lifestyle thing that I talk about, it's not a diet. It's basically the way I live my life because I want to be healthy. I know if I don't live my life that way anymore and I go back to the way I was, I will go back to being unhealthy. So a drug like Ozempic, at some level gives us some of the metabolic benefit that lifestyle does, but like any drug, I don't think it gives us all the benefit, and I think lifestyle is better. What are the problems with Ozempic? Well, one, you have to take it all your life, but you have to do your lifestyle all your life. And if you stop and go back, with any drug, there are side effects with all drugs. With lifestyle, there are side effects, but we generally appreciate them because lifestyle's been going on for thousands of years. And if we do things with lifestyle, the side effects are usually under our control. With Ozempic, we don't know. Things are coming out. There's a report on suicidality with increased suicides with this, sort of like with statins. We've seen with all-cause mortality, people have fewer heart attacks, but they start dying at a higher frequency of other things. One of them is suicide or traffic accidents, indicating brain issues. So I think Ozempic it's a model for what we could do with lifestyle, and it hints at what we can do with lifestyle. I think lifestyle is ultimately more powerful. I've posted, and others have posted about hard-boiled egg being nature's Ozempic. If you eat 3 of these a day, you're going to lose weight because you're going to fill up on it. And hard-boiled eggs are extremely healthy. They're one of the healthiest things you can eat, assuming you don't have an egg allergy, but because they're basically proteins and fat. They have very little carbohydrate in them, so you can like your friend who went on the carnivore diet, they effectively cut out carbohydrates. And carbohydrates are one of the big drivers, not just for type 2 diabetes, but for all the metabolic abnormalities that contributed to my gout, to my hypertension, to my dyslipidemia, and also, Alzheimer's, and I would argue all the way down to mental illness. So you can have much more powerful effects with lifestyle. And a quick comment back about your carnivore diet. I love that. Unfortunately, diets have been getting politicized a little bit. You're either vegan or carnivore. And I want to say I love my vegan friends. I used to be vegan. I love my carnivore friends. I've tried carnivore as well. I think you can be very healthy or very unhealthy on either one of those extremes of diets and anywhere in between, depending on the choices you make about macronutrients, food timing, and other things. And we discuss that in the book. But the big thing is to avoid junk foods. And junk foods are the drivers that are driving this metabolic disease, in my opinion. And the junk foods are, high carbohydrate. They're subsidized by the federal government. That's why junk food's cheaper, because they're made with corn. Corn is artificially lower in price, corn oil, and then also seed oils, which are also extremely pro-inflammatory, and they make up a large component of, of, you can edit that out or you can leave it in. or they're very pro-inflammatory, but they're all over junk food, salad dressing, everything has seed oils on them. And even grains, I talk about grains as being problematic for many patients as far as driving inflammation. And so, long answer, short question.
And I mean, yes, and that kind of just brings up that I think we've gotten to the point now where people know about big pharma. Like, it's no longer really that controversial yet to talk about the perverse financial incentives on that end. But now the new thing to call out is big junk food, right? Because that's the thing. And I mean, people really like it. It's not as though a lot of people don't want to give it up. And you were talking about, it's just easier. Like, I'll just take this medicine so I can keep on eating it. I mean, I'm at an ARDD longevity conference now, and there was a few talks about even people developing drugs to mimic exercise. So, forget actually, going out and running or, doing exercise. They're just going to pop a pill to make the effects the same in your body. So that, I think that's definitely a driver. And now you mentioned with lifestyle is harder. And, that's another reason why, this whole like personalized medicine is really going to be important, of how to actually help people to optimize their lifestyles in a way that, kind of naturally flows with them, I guess, where it doesn't feel like they're giving up who they are, or maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Wait. We need to talk. You can mimic exercise with the pill. We're just turning into Wall-E right now. I feel like that's what we're getting towards, is like going to be going around on these little scooters.
Well, it's like rapamycin, the famous mTOR drug that your audience may be familiar with. I talk about a lot in the book, and it's an FDA-approved drug that's used off-label for longevity. I mean, I take it for longevity, and the way it works, it mimics fasting essentially in the body. So it kind of has effect. In fasting, caloric restriction is no questions the most powerful longevity tool ever tested in animals, and rapamycin is the most powerful pharmaceutical intervention that's been discovered so far for longevity in all animal models that it's been tested in. And there's evidence to think it works in humans. But having said all that, I would never just go back to my normal lifestyle and take rapamycin and expect to get the benefits of it. I would never take rapamycin without doing the lifestyle. The lifestyle is key, foundational, fundamental, and I'd be missing a huge opportunity, I think, if I depended all on rapamycin or acarbose or metformin or whatever.
Okay, we're kind of going, I'm not going to say off script, because we haven't really gotten to any of our questions. So we just got this. But I'm going to keep going off of that, because I have another question. So from your book, from your research, from everything like that, if I wanted to begin a lifestyle journey, having never done it, having a chronic disease or not, what would the first step be for somebody that's never done it before?
Yeah, the most powerful thing we get to do every day is eat our nutrition. So I would take a look at that. And for me, what it was, and for many people, I think it'll be the same thing. I was told, my mom was a dietitian, right? So I was raised that thinking about nutrition is good. Unfortunately, we followed the food pyramid, which is bad advice. It's to eat carbs and junk food all the time. And, but anyway, but I was told to eat lots of small meals throughout the day, and snacking was good. And so the first thing I would recommend is just stop snacking all the time. Just eat 3 meals and eat those. And if you want to be more aggressive, skip breakfast or dinner, and I do 1 meal a day. So I get benefits of a mini fast throughout the day that I think is healthy. So without changing what you eat, you can change when you eat and get some health benefits. But I would first start on nutrition because it's a choice. Every morning I wake up, I decide what I'm going to eat, but then it's not enough just to nutrition. We have to fix our sleep. We have to fix our exercise, both mental and physical, and we have to fix our stress.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's kind of like well established in longevity that the caloric restriction, intermittent fasting is like pretty much the number one thing that anyone can do so far to extend their health span. But I'm wondering, how has the scientific community responded to your book in general and these overall, like the fact that you're saying that medical schools are teaching a bunch of lies? Like, how has the response been?
Well, I haven't been fired yet, but I think I have tenure though, so they can't fire me. But that's a good question. That's a great question. And I answer it 2 ways. First of all, the reception has been warm, collegial. I think reasonable people can agree to disagree. And, we look at the evidence and we interpret it, and that's the best we can do. And this is the way I interpret the evidence. And it gets back to the very nature of science and medicine. There's one of the greatest physicians of all time is Sir William Osler. Lived over 100 years ago, but he made one of the greatest quotes about medical education when he was addressing a group of medical students on the day they graduated, the first day they were becoming doctors. They just finished medical school. And he says, in his quote, he says, "Gentlemen," and back then most of them were gentlemen, but he said, "Gentlemen, I have a confession to make. 50% of what we just taught you in medical school is wrong. And unfortunately, we don't know which half it is." But that speaks to the constantly evolving nature of science and medicine. We need to continually question what we believe, what we thought is true. And for a number of reasons, the internet and just the scientific revolution, things are changing so fast at an accelerating pace. In the last 10 years, since the turn of the century, research in all these areas has been exploding, and there are breakthroughs in our understanding that just haven't reached the public yet. People still get recommendations. Oh, you're at risk for heart disease. Don't eat eggs. Don't eat egg yolks. And because of cholesterol, that's a fear of cholesterol in our diet. And now it's been completely debunked that dietary cholesterol has very little effect on blood cholesterol. And that's because cholesterol is so important that if you lower your dietary cholesterol, your blood cholesterol you'll make more. And if you eat a lot of cholesterol in your diet, your cholesterol will still stay the same because it'll process it. Now there's another question then, what about serum cholesterol and the risk factors for cardiovascular disease? And we talk about that in one of the chapters of the book. And I think that has undergone a major transformation as well. But it just shows that knowledge is changing and it's not getting out to the general public. And even, sadly, in my opinion, my colleagues that are still teaching certain things. And, and I'm probably missing stuff too. Every day we're all learning something, but we really have to pay attention and make an effort to get the latest information because it matters for our own chronic diseases and our own longevity.
I mean, I think I said, I was talking about this with my husband this weekend of like, isn't it crazy that in our lifespan, we've gone from not having the internet to having an internet to having big chunky cell phones to having iPhones and now we have AI and the increase of technology and knowledge in the last 30 years or so is incredible. And so I agree with you, if you stay in your bubble and you're not constantly researching or trying to stay up with what's happening in the scientific world, in the technological world, like you're going to fall behind in your data and your knowledge is going to be left there. And it's so, especially because so many different people are doing research. I mean, Jasmine can speak to the conference of just so many different types of research and studies being done right now. But it's, I guess, overwhelming to get all of the knowledge that you need of what's happening, basically. So, I
no, that's
don't.
that's totally true. One of the powers of modern medicine and modern science is specialization. So if you go to medical school, there's a department of nephrology, of kidney disease. There's a department of endocrinology. Everyone is specialized: neurosurgery, neurology, radiology. And that allows people to get really deep into things. The problem with these chronic diseases, this 21st century tsunami, is that it overlaps. The arthritis people, the rheumatologists, have to understand the metabolism to know that glucose and fructose metabolism is driving urate, which causes gout. So this specialization, which is so powerful and so necessary for doing detailed research, hinders the ability for some broad-reaching things like underlying root metabolic cause that affects every one of these diseases. It can be missed or overlooked, and I think that's somewhat at play here.
Yes, like what kind of initiatives would you recommend, or maybe that you're working on in order to sort of solve this and get everybody up to speed on that kind of a thing? The fact that we do need holistic knowledge about health, and that this is something that needs to change now, that clinical level.
Yeah. Great question. Well, for me, writing the book, I try to get the information out to people, and I think we talked online that we're working with a charity that we may be soon making the book available to all medical students at no cost, and we're still setting that up. But that's our aspiration and hope. But beyond that, there's a lot of nutritional and lifestyle initiatives. Nina Teicholz has written a groundbreaking book about fat metabolism. She is the head of the Nutrition Coalition. They're working with the food pyramid people. The food pyramid are the recommendations on what food to eat that influence our school food programs, our veterans, our military food programs. And it's basically, it's recently been published that most of the people who put the food pyramid together